podcast is powered by PKF. PKF, your trusted advisor in the Hunter for over 45 years. Down to Business acknowledges the traditional owners of the land and waters this podcast is recorded on.
Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Down to Business. I'm your host Andrew Beattie, and joining me today is the great man, Mr. Bob Bell, or Robert Bell, currently Managing Director of PKF Newcastle and Sydney. Look, a bit about Bob: avid St George supporter, former hooker for the mighty Canterbury Bulldogs, president of the Panania Diggers Soccer Club, can recite every Melbourne Cup winner since, for about the last 60 years. I challenge you to take him up on that. Husband of Alison, father of 7, grandfather of 8, friend of many, close to my heart, been a mentor for a long time, and great to have him finally on the podcast. Welcome, Bobby.
Thank you very much, Boots.
Mate, I've given you a bit of a very summarised version of your life. A bit of background from the day starting as a young whippersnapper in the accounting world to where you are today. So I guess our audience understands a bit about your vast journey and business experience.
Yes, Boots. Well, I actually started in the public service. I knocked back a job at a cadetship at Pete Marwick Mitchell, forerunner of KPMG, back in 1979. And my father, being a ex-war veteran, was very big on the public service, and there was a role there. So I started in the Department of Finance. 2.5 years later, I realised I probably needed to do something different. Found myself a role with a small accounting firm in Sydney, Star Green & Co. they were called. They were mainly an insolvency firm, but I started on the business services side. And that firm grew and merged and ended up becoming O'Brien Star Green, back to Star Green. Then in 1986, they merged with what was then Panel Kerr Foster, so the original PKF. And I joined that firm. At the time, that firm had a very large audit that was its base for the firm, and it was building a bigger firm with other smaller firms. It was never going to work, and as young fellows we could see that. So I left there, started a small practice with one of my cohorts there, Judy Starr. We started Starr and Bell in 1988, and we ran that. Started with 2 of us, finished up at 8. And then that ran its course, and I joined Court & Co. in 1994, which is now in the Nexia network. I was there for a few years, and my business partner at the time, John Burris, suggested we go and start our own firm. So that's when Burris and Bell started in 1997. We actually spoke to Lawler Partners at the time because we knew a few people, but ended up going our own way. And I think we started with 8 of us in O'Connell Street, 2 O'Connell Street in the city. John doing insolvency, myself doing business services. By 2006, we built that to 24 people, and we again spoke to Lawler Partners, and that's the time we did merge. So I think there were 30 people in Sydney, and plus our 24 made 54, and there were 110, I think, in Newcastle. So we'd gone to a very small firm to a larger firm. And since that merger, we a year after moved across the road to 1 O'Connell Street, and we've been there ever since.
So yeah, it's funny how things go full circle. So it's quite funny how things go full circle. I mean, O'Connell Street to O'Connell Street, and 10 years longer between drinks, but talking to Lawlers, etc. And for those who don't know, Lawlers being the precursor of the current PKF. What goes around comes around, I guess. So it's interesting where you've ended up. But with all of that, how's the importance and how is it something that came naturally, or something you had to adapt to around, I guess, change management?
Change was a constant. So when I started in accounting, we didn't have a computer. It was all done by pen and pencil and paper. We had big 13-column worksheets to do our budgets on, and if you wanted to change a formula and do it again, then you rubbed it out and you started again. After a while, we got a computer that a computer operator ran, and then we'd give them our journal entries, and they would process things from there, and that went for many years. It wasn't until the 90s that we actually got our own desktop to work on. The great thing about that is the learning of doing it yourself and having to really take your time to work through things properly and get them right rather than have to redo them all the time was fantastic. the way you did business at the time without email or mobile phones. If you'd go out to a meeting and come back, you'd have a spike full of messages and you'd return those calls. It was a very, very different world, but it worked well in its own way. Producing financial statements was the aim in the time. You didn't have a lot of time to do much more than to produce information. And obviously, as technology grew and we got access to eventually laptops and things like in the 80s, Lotus 123 was the first version of Excel. And I had what I called the Luggable, a portable compact computer I could take out to clients, weighed about 20 kilos. But we could do spreadsheets on there, we could do modelling, we could start that, and my partner at the time, Ken Bromley, was very clever and very good at that, so I learned a lot off him. So being with insolvency practitioners all the time, they were always looking at solving problems. So we weren't there just to do numbers, we were looking at how we solve problems. So the more access we got to information to do three-way cash flows that we were doing in the 80s, they were a boon for clients, and we were able to, learn more about our clients' businesses and be able to assist them more because we were able to use the tools we had to start to get that information out and advice.
It's a good point, I think, on that insolvency piece, and whilst we're talking accounting, this could apply to a lot of business owners full stop, where, many people look at insolvency and go, well, I'm not in trouble, I don't want to deal with them. But in reality, they look at things differently. They really get down to the nuts and bolts of a business, understand what drives it, in the hope of recovery. Like, you're right, there's a lot you can learn about that and then apply.
Exactly, and that's why most of them call themselves business restructures in these days. So business restructure and insolvency is what we call our team. So turning around and on a legal basis, there was no voluntary administration system until 1993. And at that time, that came in where there were alternatives to liquidation. The only alternative before was a scheme of arrangement, which was quite complicated. But this voluntary administration system allowed people to go through a period, reset their business, do a deal with their creditors, and then move on with their business. And again, that became a very, very rich source of being able to help businesses work out where they're at, work out why they're there, work out whether they can get out of it, and move on from there. So it's certainly a fertile area of learning.
Yeah, sure. So I guess, long history, and you've come to where you are now. You've been in various roles within PKF, being, primarily for a long time the business unit leader at Business Advisory Service in Sydney. Now, and 18 months now, I guess, thereabouts, Managing Director.
Mm-hmm.
How's that?
Interesting.
Well, I guess I asked that, and I mean, we have an internal laugh, I guess, but in your business advisory role and even looking after the division, let's be honest, your main role is still giving clients advice and other people's businesses. I guess now you're actually going and practicing what you preach, aren't you? Because you're moving into that primary role being managing our establishment. What's the transition like, and how was it made more successful? I mean, I guess we're getting on succession planning here. What sort of preparedness was there, etc.?
I was in an interesting spot because I'd come from smaller firms, and the other firms I'd been in, I'd always had a management role, always had a passion for practice management and an understanding of how practices worked. And so when the opportunity was looking to arise to be the managing director, I thought I would like to take that on. One, because as I get a little bit older and head towards retirement, and I need to move away from clients, hand over clients to the young up-and-comers, the experience I have and the knowledge of how our practice runs, because I worked closely with the previous managing director, Steve Main, for many years, and having that knowledge, I felt it was a good transition, a good place for me to be at this stage, and a good place for the firm for me to be at this stage. And when we started to talk about it and it was decided I would take it on, that was probably nearly 2 years out from when I took the role. And Steve Main and others had developed a very detailed program of handover where we had a quarterly meeting. He took me through what he does. I went through a lot of information, and it really enthused me and made me comfortable that the firm had been so well managed. As much as you, as partners, were involved in how things happen, to actually see what goes on behind the scenes, day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year, is a lot. And there was a lot of planning went into it. There was a lot of organisation, and to that extent, it made the process a very easy transition.
Yeah, because I think just to give context, what you just said, for those that don't know, you're now responsible for a business of, well, if you add the bits and bobs in, it's probably closer to 300 people.
Yep.
It's about 600 egos. But if we're looking at that aspect, a lot of moving parts, a lot of specialists. I think too many people think, I've got an accountant. Well, it's a very different accounting on steroids, if you like, when you go to a multidiscipline, and especially people that are probably doing stuff you and I don't understand as well. So you got that to navigate. A turnover of circa 60 million. No small fry. A very, very large wage bill, which takes up a big chunk of that.
Some of which is deserved.
But you look and say it's a very different, kettle of fish to what you came out of. And I think that key part, some people be able to relate, and some people maybe a bit smaller or larger, but it's all relative. But we're saying for that kind of business, you had a 2-year, learning period, let alone transition afterwards.
Yep.
And yet we've got business owners that give themselves a month or worse, something tragic happens and they're not prepared for it. So it's that importance of, I guess, being prepared in that succession process.
It is absolutely critical. And as you know, we have a very solid succession planning process for our firm. So each of the units has to go through, every couple of years, go through a process of looking who they've got in the business, how long they're going to be there, how they're going, how the business is going, do they need new partners, if they're going to come in, how are they going to be funded, how are they going to manage to buy into the practice, for those that are looking towards retirement, when are they going to be leaving, how is that going to be funded on the way out. There's so many things involved in it, and I think as a firm we do it quite well, that we do plan ahead and make sure that saying, okay, I know what my succession plan is, and it involves bringing people through our unit to make sure they are bonded with the clients, they understand the clients understand them, and they're in a position to take over, and also that they understand how to run the business. Running a client base and looking after your clients is very different to having to understand how the wages are being paid and how we're generating our revenue and how we're making sure that the partners and the business is getting a good return on what we do. So it's a very much a learning process for everyone, but the more you're immersed in it, the better you get at it, I think, and planning is absolutely critical.
Well, and I think one of the key things you just said there, you don't necessarily have to have all the answers.
No.
But it's actually building that into your, call it annual or quarterly or whatever it may be, asking the right questions.
Yes.
Making people think about it. So, yeah. So I guess, mate, as I said, you've now been in the role, and whilst you're a great accountant, Bobby, I think you're a better people person. So careful what you wish for, Buck, because now you are in that managing partner role. Managing people generally, I'm interested in your thoughts around this, and even then more specifically, when you've got like what you're into, you've got a lot of smart people, a lot of I'd say industry leaders in some of their areas of expertise. How do you deal with that?
I'm fortunate in that I do have probably too much patience, and I do like to listen to people. I do like to hear them out, and particularly if they're my business partners and senior people, they deserve to be heard out. Some talk more than others, and we know some in this business that talk more than others. But as you say, they are very smart people, and the one thing I know is I don't know everything. And particularly when we're looking at people doing the work that's done these days. So it's not just your accounts and your audits. It's our GRC team doing this data analysis over payrolls to understand if people are being paid properly. It's the analysis being done in relation to businesses and how they can perform better. So many technologies we have, and so many people that are able to utilise that. And so I do spend too much time with some people in others' eyes, but the more time the better as far as I'm concerned. I did plan to be spending 2/3 of my time on management of the practice and 1/3 on clients. Our clients are very busy, so it's 2/3 at the moment, which Mrs. Bell will have something to say about. But I just love it. I love being part of the business's success, my staff's success, our peers' success. It's just an enjoyable ride, and I like to think I can, if not get the best out of people, at least understand them to help them on their ride.
And would you say that's, I mean, there's a lot of love there. Would you say that's also the part that drives you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. People succeeding, helping people wherever you can is something that I take very seriously, hence my volunteer roles with the soccer club. It's just a lot of those sorts of clubs don't have the ability, obviously, to employ people to run them. And for people like me who have some experience in running businesses and how businesses run and just governance and organisation, I find I can add value to that committee, and they won't let me leave now. But that club's 700 players. It's an organisation in itself, and you'll learn a lot out of non-profits in the whole process. When people aren't actually striving for a profit, they're just striving to get things done. It's a very different model and a great way to understand people better.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So I guess then, touching on what you said about patience and the listening and that sort of stuff, every day people would have conflict.
Yep.
And I'll make sure I clarify this because I don't think conflict's bad. We don't get things done if we don't have debate or challenge. We don't get great outcomes. We might just get the status quo. But conflict can, cross the line. And with the amount of people you now have directly or indirectly under your guidance, what are your tips around, or what have worked for you, what hasn't worked for you around conflict resolution?
I've learned a lot over the years. I was always seen as a bit soft because I don't like a stand-up argument. I don't see the point in the stand-up argument, and sometimes that's seen as backing down, and sometimes maybe it was. But I think over the years now that, one, it starts with listening, so you have to understand what the conflict is, and two, you then have to analyse, look at yourself and say, well, what's the right and wrong here? Do I understand what's actually happening? And then three, do your best to use your understanding of the issues and your understanding of the people involved to come to a sensible resolution. And most of the time you can. I mean, a lot of what I get is people letting off steam, or people who might not quite understand what we've actually done or what's happening. And so being able to explain things to them and just take them through what's happening, or just to listen to them, can often resolve the conflict. Some people don't want conflict to be resolved, they just want it. And those sort of people don't stay with our firm. They won't get time from me unless they want to buy into the resolution process.
And I mean, obviously, from a point of view of our business, we have a number of people that support you in that management capacity. What about some of, even some of your clients or smaller business, but who don't have that support?
We become, as you know, the trusted advisor, and I have some clients that have been with me since the day I started in accounting on the 6th of July 1981. So there are two guys, a doctor and a fellow who used to have a furniture shop, who still with us today. In 1986, I picked up a couple of clients who had been through an insolvency process and then started up again. And I started working with them. They're two of my biggest clients still today, one in furniture, one in logistics. And as those businesses grow, you become very much their manager, their mentor, their counsellor, all those things, and you work closely with them. It's a great way to learn from their businesses, as I've learned over time. And as time has gone on and everyone gets a bit older, the level of trust and the level of interest in each other and the business, and then your families, etc., just grows and grows.
Mm. No, that's a good point. So obviously relationships have been, I guess, a massive part of your not only career but success.
Absolutely, it's critical to everything. Along the way, you lose people, people that were your partners, people that were on side aren't anymore. That happens, and it's happened a few times. But you can't let that get to you. You grow different and you move on. You've got to be true to yourself in all these situations. Obviously now we have the concept of advisory boards and things for clients, and that's another way that we can just assist with our own skills and make sure we're dealing with the people we want to deal with. I mean, we all have clients that are difficult at times, and some of my best clients are the most difficult, but they will challenge me and I will challenge them. And we'll sit down and have a beer afterwards.
Yeah, and I think that's the key thing. That's a very valued point. Too many people, I think, raise something and really take it to heart, and that sits with them. And I think the next point I wanted to talk about, and again, we're seeing this theme here where, I guess, from advising others in business to now very much being a people-centric role that you're in. Often I see you, the things that come to mind are values, respect, etc. What about the importance of putting people first? And it comes off that listening comment and that sort of stuff rather than, the issue.
Absolutely. And obviously in our training for our people coming through the ranks these days, we talk about better conversations. And better conversations is all about listening. And I think become much better at it over the years. But particularly if you haven't heard what's being said and thought about what's being said, you're just not going to solve a problem. And I had an interesting chat with a senior staff member last week who's had a few conflicts within the place and didn't get a promotion. And I said, well, you're as smart as anything, you work as hard as anything, you're doing a great job. But if you can't get on with people, you can't go forward. You just can't keep moving forward without having relationships and having respect. Now, you don't have to agree with people all the time. You don't have to be the same as them, but that has to be a part of how you continue to build, as you say, trust and respect and moving forward.
And as you said, I think you alluded to before, you don't know everything, you're not always right. And realistically, if you're not prepared to listen to other people, well, be a sole trader or something.
Absolutely.
Run your own race. But I guess off the back of that as well, it's that relationship piece as well, but not to keep bringing it up, but you've been in the game for a long time. You've seen a lot of change, but how important is it? And I'm interested or intrigued how you relate from people of your vintage right down to now. We've got people younger than your children that are coming and working with us, and what's been the learning curve there, or things you've had to adapt to?
I suppose I'm a kid at heart, and as you all know, I joke a fair bit, and maybe too much for some people's liking at times, but I like to keep things light unless they don't need to be. Being involved and having all the children and all the grandchildren, I've had a period of being around young people forever, participated and spectated and coached and did things in a whole range of sports and activities. And I've always treated those people as special as they've grown up. They're my kids' friends, my kids' cousins, etc. Everyone's got something to offer, and you can learn something off people of every age. And as I've gone on, I've very much kept in touch with people. And one of the great things for me is the advent of social media, those sorts of things. I don't overuse them, but the fact you can keep in touch with people without having to travel, without having to pick up a phone or whatever, but you can always feel connected to people and feel like you're available for them a lot more than you used to, I think is an excellent thing.
Don't need to know what people are having for breakfast every day, but
no, no need for that.
So we mentioned relationships, and you're a master at with your partner in crime, Tony, at networking. I guess when we think of networking, we think externally, but networking's also, especially in a business of what you're managing, the size, networking's internally as well. Talk to me about your approach to networking and what that means.
I'm probably an unstructured person in relation to networking. Over the years, I've been to all the courses, I've had all sorts of mentors and training, and obviously there are certain things where you need to work at networking, you need to be at places, you need to go to functions, you need to press the flesh, those sorts of things. I'm not one just to stand around for idle chat. I really like to get to know people and be with them. So I say to my staff as they come up, yes, it's important to be at places, but it's important just to engage with people. And it doesn't matter who they are, whether they're the janitor or whether they're a CEO. If you meet them somewhere and you're in a situation where you can talk to them, then do that, talk to them. On top of that, you have a layer of very structured networking, and what our firm does well, with Tony in particular, is that we have a wonderful group of referrers from all sorts of walks of life, between our clients, the solicitors, the bankers, the brokers, the other accountants that we work with in our field, are great sources of referral work for us and great sources of networking, not only for us to receive referrals, but to be able to hand them out, to have people we trust look after our clients in other areas. So I just love that constant process of being in touch with people and just talking normally to people without trying to sell.
That's a good point. That's that relationship piece, getting that person first and understanding, what they're made up of and what potentially you can just help with.
Yeah.
Mate, here's one for you. You've been telling other people how to run their business for so long. What are the tips or the habits you've developed, especially in the new role, to run the PKF business?
Have an excellent EA.
Yeah.
Actually two. But that are there to pick up for you when you miss stuff, and also to provide that structure to be able to get you through, because as unstructured as I like to be, you can't do the job without a level of structure. So having that support from there and from the staff and from your family and others is critical. It's making sure they're there. What I've got a lot better at, I think, in that time is ensuring I put aside time for specific things to make sure things get done properly and on time, because the worst thing is trying to do something as the MD and you haven't prepared for it and you don't have the right info. So getting that level of structure has been very important for me. I've found it quite naturally, people want to help you. They know you're new in the role, they appreciate that, they want certain things from you, and we work together to determine how they best get that from me. So I want to make sure all the partners and everyone under them is getting what they need from me. And also, we have such a wonderful team, our practice services team, our business management team, that the people are so well trained and well versed in how we operate this business, and there are no massive egos in those people. They're all there to get the job done and work together. So I'm very fortunate to have that. So my main focus is keeping that together, keeping that flow going, and that enables me to do what I have to do.
And I guess a good point. So I guess one of those ones you said about, people want to help. You got to allow them to help as well and be vulnerable. And I guess that's that experience and maturity where you don't need to impress anyone. It's let's take it when it's there.
Yeah, and I'm the same bloke in many ways, but I just learnt so much over the years, and I suppose I'm actually in awe of the people we have in the firm and the people we deal with, and to sit up here as the head of this firm in Sydney and Newcastle is quite fascinating to me. Quite fascinating to a lot of people that knew me a long time ago when I was sticking my head in scrums also, I must say. But it is such that was such a wonderful base for me, and I shall never, ever, ever take for granted where I am and how I've got here.
No, it's wonderful. Mate, well, couple a few more questions. As you alluded to before, you do like a bit of fun and sometimes more than not. But I am ingrained from the same sort of belief. What is your view on the importance of fun and humour, for that matter, especially in an environment where it can be quite stressful?
Everyone's different. I think that's the first place to start. I can't live without humour. My clients, the people I live with, are the pretty laconic Australians in the main who work hard, have fun. And that having fun means taking the piss, as we say in Australia. And there's a fair bit of that goes on. My children have grown up in the same ilk, and I just don't really resonate with people that don't have fun. If they can't get out of their shell to enjoy what they do, I fully accept that some people are quieter and they're different. And
different. Yeah.
And you've got to be careful around those people. You don't want to be loud around them. You don't want to annoy them, but you can still have a joke with them, and you can still be light. And I think part of it, particularly going around the office, is being light, and going to meetings is not being overtly serious and concerned about things until you have to be. And obviously things will arise where you've got to get down and dirty into the nitty-gritty of things, but mainly let's just all get on together like we're all a bunch of pals here, as we should be, and that's the best way to get things done.
That's great advice. On the advice front, we've got a couple more. I'm going to say your biggest mistake, which could be your biggest lesson.
Oh, there's far too many of those to ponder. I suppose I don't see a major mistake. I see a succession of times where I followed a direction or a person thinking that was the right way to go, and when I knew it wasn't, I kept doing it. And as you're growing up, and as you admire people in certain areas and how they do things and what they do, and particularly people with dominant personalities, you're right on their coattails a bit, and you go along, and it come to a stage where you say, geez, I'm not sure if this is right. And getting over that was the most beneficial thing for me. So being able to speak up, walk away, move on, and then clear my mind, and to be fair, clear the people around me to get on and do what I do. Having enough faith in myself, I think, to do that.
Yeah, good. I think we can all relate. And the final one on a question sense is best advice ever received.
Back in the 80s, we had a client, and his name was Paul Newman, not the actor, but he had investments in coal mines on the south coast of New South Wales. And we're in the office one day in 5 Elizabeth Street in the city that day. And he said, "Young Robert, I'll give you one piece of advice, one thing for you to remember." I said, "What's that, Paul?" He said, "The only reason you can sit in this beautiful Sydney office is because some bastard's down a coal mine." And I've never forgotten that. Yeah, right. And it is so bloody true. Yeah. We are very privileged to be able to live the life we do.
Oh, we are. And I mean, I think you're like me, come from veteran backgrounds and also blue collar, and I think you take value every day in that you're not doing the same thing, or you don't have to do the same thing. So I'm going to try and wrap some of this up. Some very good points there, and I wanted to make this one a bit different because I think you're a business advisor. The natural thing is to talk about business, but I think we're seeing more and more the importance of people, and something you've continued to improve at. But always look to where you can learn and who from.
Yep.
I think that succession piece, I think people need to realise how much time's involved for a successful transition. In your case, you're saying 2 years and beyond. So, relative there. Always ask the questions. Don't always have to have the answers. Have patience and listen, especially from an advisor's point of view. I think sometimes we jump in too quickly, that advice monster, but that's a very good one. Don't assume you know everything, and genuinely look to help people succeed, and it'll come back around. Give back. Be true to yourself. A very rare thing, and getting rarer, I think, these days. Success is very much based on relationships, and relationships are really about getting to know the people. So whether that be internal or external, very good points there. Within the role, the value of an assistant.
Absolutely.
And having structure. And I guess with that you said prepare. So some good advice there. I love the point of having fun. I like to have fun. We live in a very serious world, so your fun might be different than the next person's, but it's a good point. And one of the things to leave with is making sure you get over things. Like, don't be flippant, but get over things as quickly as you can and move on.
Absolutely.
Mate, some very, very sound advice there. We introduced it at the start, so I can hear the audience asking for it. We'd have to do a few years of the Melbourne Cup winners from the early days, mate. I'll throw it to you.
Jinx. So 1960, Hijinks, Lord Fury, Even Stevens, Gaddam, Apollo Prince, Light Fingers, Galilei, Red-Handed, Rain Lover, Silver Knight. Now I'm starting to get tested. I missed one there, I think. So I've got Piping Lane, Gala Supreme, Think Big, Vander Hum, Golden Black, R1 Hyperno, Belldale Ball, just a dash. Gurner's Lane.
Mate, we'll let you off. I think it's pretty impressive. I haven't got the notes there to compare it anyway, but I've heard you do it before, mate. Look, absolute pleasure to have you on and do it. Actually, we've talked about it for a while, so thanks for joining us in Down to Business, mate.
Greatly appreciated, Boots.
Till next time,
Thank you.
cheers.